This is 5 Minutes to Curtain. You know, when you talk theater around this certain area, there's a couple of names that seem to always pop up, and one of them actually is today's guest. Welcome to the show, Mr. Scott Hurst.
Thank you, Ian.
So good to have you.
What a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, we certainly picked, I think, the best day of the week so far from what I'm looking at, and we've got boats in the background and beautiful scenery, but so let's get into it.
Okay.
Let's talk a little bit about growing up. Was a young Scott kind of like the character around the house, pulling off different characters?
Well, I didn't even see that coming. Okay, yeah, I mean, and I'm glad you brought it up, and I'll tell you why in just a second. So I was 15 years of age, roly-poly kid who felt very self-conscious, and our high school, which didn't do musicals, a lot of people in grade 13 wanted to do a last hurrah for their final year, so they decided to do a musical. They lost a couple people in it. They said, "You sing, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah." I think I was in grade 10 at the time. And they said, "Well, we'd like to have you in the show." And believe it, I mean, it sounds really trite to say it, but on the opening night, I went running down the aisle because my character had to make an entrance and jump onto the stage. And the audience reacted, and I was never the same after that. It was like, oh, this is affirming, and this is, I can do this. And then, as fate would have it, I met a mentor from New York who was teaching dance and drama classes, and he got me involved in the community theater in St. Catharines, Garden City Productions, and I never looked back. And my parents were both supportive enough to sort of go, "That's what you want. That's what you want. We're proud of you."
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, there's a story behind that too, because if it was not for theater, you lacking a bit of self-confidence, whatever, it brought all that out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that it put me in a community of other people who had been feeling the same way. And I mean, we all often say that a lot of theater people are misfits. And I don't think that's the appropriate word, but I get the idea that we just don't feel we sometimes fit in other places. But in the theater, live theater, we're right at home. We're right at home in our community of participants. We're right at home on the stage. We're right at home creating for the stage. So yeah, I don't know what would have happened had that not happened at age 15. I probably would have been a postal worker like my father. You know?
Well, nothing, there's anything wrong with that either.
Absolutely not, except that it sort of killed his back. You know? So I prefer to kill my back in theater instead.
Yeah, exactly. Was there no sign of it before then? Like that was the time that
I was a singer. You know, I would sing in choirs and that sort of stuff. And luckily, because I have a barrel chest and whatever it was at the time, a very resonant sound. So people were like, "You have a big sound for a little guy," you know? And I remember years later I was doing a show in Huron Country Playhouse, and the critic, the reviewer for the show said, "Scott Hurst's voice is so powerful that they must need to put the barn boards back on the theater every night." Not true, but it was kind of an interesting observation that she perceived it as something large and round, and whatever sort of thing.
Yeah. So when coming into Barrie, when did all this start to come to fruition with arriving here?
Yeah, well, 1994, and just around about that period, I was working up in Midland.
Okay.
I had put everything from Toronto into storage. Met Mr. Wright. Mr. Wright said he didn't want to move to Toronto. So I said, well, okay, I don't really want to move to Barrie either. And then here we are 30 years later. We have 30 years together as a partner, as a couple, and we've lived pretty much in the same neighborhood for about 28 of those years.
Wow.
And we love it here, and I just love the opportunities for all the things I do, photography and health work and theater, and it's a great area for that.
You wear a lot of hats, my friend.
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
And you got full support as well from home, which is, we talked about a zillion times on the show, is fully needed. Yeah.
Well, even Rob said to me very early on, he said, if you've got a project that really excites you and you want to do it, we're not going to get kicked out into the street, we're not going to starve, so you go do it. And that freedom allowed me to do a lot of things, including directing, and going to Russia for a period of time, going to the Stratford Festival for I think 3 or 4 seasons since I met him, kind of thing. So yeah, it's been the support of the community, but the support of my partner, I mean, has really made it all possible.
Yeah, awesome. So was there a point where you discovered that this is going to be a full-time gig? This is your life? Or are you still thinking that?
Well, I mean, it's the difference between having a career and making a living.
Exactly.
Sometimes they aren't the same thing. I think when I went to university, Brock University in St. Catharines, I thought that this was something I wanted to pursue. They kind of knocked me down a couple of pegs because they didn't really appreciate, at that time, they do now, but they didn't appreciate musical theater performers. And I've certainly battled with that all my career. But it gave me that sense of like, okay, I'll show you. And so I went off to Toronto, immediately got work in dinner theater and in children's theater. And within 3 or 4 years, I was working at Stratford, and I was working at the St. Lawrence Centre, dinner theater, down east in Charlottetown, all that sort of thing. And you know, every couple of years you go, is this going to hold up? Am I going to be able to pay the bills? And sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
So sometimes you do have to go out and do a temp job, or you do have to go out and wait tables and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But I've been very grateful for the fact that sometimes I can teach when I'm not acting or directing. Sometimes I can write, and that pays a few bills. So yeah, as you say, I wear a lot of hats. I wear them gladly and gratefully, because I know that sometimes they aren't going to fit anymore, you know. But yeah, no, life's good.
Yeah, good,
Yeah.
good. So with the you do a lot of work. We talked earlier about with Cookstown Theatre. Is there certain roles that you like to do with them, or do you kind of like to sort of generalize with your talent and kind of share a little bit here and there, or do you actually like to get your hands right involved in the midst of things?
Yeah. Well, it's a 25-year history with them. In 2000, Renee Chingalani called me up and she said, Scott, you know, they've got some problems with one of the shows down there. They're having to cancel one and change another one around. They've lost their director. Can you come and direct? And I did, and I liked them and they liked me. And so they asked me if I would be their resident director or artistic director. And I said, well, most community theaters don't have artistic directors, but sure, let's talk about it. And for the next 2 years, I basically did box office, newsletter, subscriptions, marketing. I directed all the shows. I chose all the shows. And then I said, you know, you're not getting stronger as an organization. I said, what I'd like to do is I'd like to make sure that there's always people shadowing me, and then eventually we'll be able to say that, you know, as a team we pick a season, and as a team we pick the directors and the designers and that sort of stuff. And that worked for them. They almost kind of had to do it because that was the year that in 2002, I had cast a show for the fall, and I got the call to go to Moscow. And so they sort of said, well, I guess we're going to do it without you for a while. And luckily they didn't have to do it without me for too long. The show didn't last as long as we thought it was going to, but it brought me back, and as you say, what are the favorite things? So at that point I came back into directing. I came back into still doing freelance acting. A couple of one-person shows came my way, one that I created and one that somebody else created that I directed. And along the way you sort of go, well, what is it I like to do? And really, it only hit me when I joined the Barrie Photo Club. I love to tell stories. And I love, as a director and a designer and a writer and as a photographer, I love to tell people where I think they might want to look, because here's where the story's being told. Kind of thing. So as a teacher and an instructor, both for actors and directors, I think I've got something to share now that I might not have had when I was younger. I do a lot of work with young people who are going into post-secondary education and want to know what they can look forward to at the learning institution and what they can look forward to when they graduate.
Okay, yeah.
You know, and that's an ever-changing scene, but I love being a part of it.
Nice. Well, leading into that, I wanted to ask you a little bit about workshops, because I know you're big on the workshops, and you love to keep them rolling all the time that I see. Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the workshops?
Sure. Last July and August, we did a test run of an acting class, and we thought we'd max it out at 10 people for the class. We had 30 people sign up, so we created 3 different evenings to do it. People said they wanted more of it. They didn't want just 6 weeks. So we continued it on into the fall. We added things like scene study and monologue preparation. We eventually added on the directing workshop as well, which went very, very well. And people are now, as we talked before the camera rolled, you know, people are really hungry right now to experience a number of things. We have one woman in South Simcoe right now. She's trying everything, but her response to her most recent directing thing was, I liked it, I was grateful for it, I don't want to do it again. You know, so it's not for everybody. But I think unless you take that workshop and you start working through how this would be like, how this could be like, we're finding people who are are actors first and foremost, but they're now getting into writing, because we're talking about storytelling as a powerful thing. We're talking about the power of writing things that will make a difference. I'm a big one for creating things on stage and creating stories and creating classes that make a difference, that actually matter. I mean, we talk about the difference between performing and acting, and they're toolkits that we need in all of our, we all need those abilities, but we need to know when we stop performing and when we start acting, what those things mean. So we talk about that a lot in our acting classes, and we're trying to make sure that the choices of shows we do, the way we approach them, is going to make a difference, because there's so many things that we became aware of and awakened to in the past 4 years that you sort of go, we can't keep telling it through the same lens, we can't keep telling it through the same gender or sexuality or culture, and that, if we keep perpetuating I'm going to say white male playwrights from England and Russia. If we keep perpetuating that, then other voices are not going to be heard. So one of the things in one of the shows I've got coming up, and we're moving towards this in all the workshops as well, is exploring other voices.
Okay.
And making sure that everybody is welcome on stage. We're trying to break down all the barriers that people may have thought existed in the past. We're trying to learn from other communities. One of the things that I thought was really interesting came out of the pandemic discussions was that somebody said, well, how can we welcome diversity to our theaters? And the people of diversity said, stop thinking of it as your theater.
True. And open the doors.
That was but it was like, it's so simple. Yes, stop thinking of it as our theater. So when we go out and we talk to other communities and other ways of storytelling and other ways of putting on theater, we're learning so much and saying, okay, but now you've got to come and do this. You don't want your story interpreted through my lens. And I think that a lot of professional theater companies are doing the same thing right now. They used to bring on an Indigenous playwright, let's say, to do a play, but they would hire pretty much all European or white people to design it, market it, and direct it. And now we're saying, yeah, we've all got to tell our own stories, and we can learn from each other. And how may I help make it? How may I serve? How may I make it easier for you to do what you need to do? Yeah. I'm now at the age where I know that it's time for me to step aside and start making room for people. But if they think there's something that I have to offer, I'm happy to stick around and do that.
Yeah,
do just that.
Yeah. What do you think makes a good director?
Oh, wow.
Tough question, isn't it?
Well, it's such a comprehensive question, but it is a good question. I would say anybody who's been on the other side of the stage, who's been on stage, usually knows how the actors work, and it usually allows a director to tap into how people might be motivated, how people might think. You have to be respectful of process and realize that not everybody in this show is going to have the same process, and try and eventually get everybody onto the same page so that it looks like I quote this so often. Nathan Lane just received a Stephen Sondheim Award recently, and one of his things in his acceptance speech was music theater in particular is very hard to do and hard to get right, but it usually the shows that get right, he says, are usually as a result of a unified vision, one voice, and genuine collaboration. And a lot of us talk about genuine collaboration, but then when we get around the table, we sort of go, oh, I've brought this to the table. And we realize that everybody's done it off in seclusion. So right now, once again, with the South Simcoe Theatre and other groups in the area, we're trying to make sure that these are collaborative efforts where everybody has a voice. There does need to be the producer and the director to eventually say, we haven't got the money for that, or maybe on another production this will happen. But realizing that everybody's got something to bring to it. Once again, it is, a lot of people will say, well, it's only community theater. And I go, it's not only community theater. I say, it's what it is. It's part-time theater. You only have 10 hours a week to devote to this. I have 24/7, and that's how I've lived most of my life. So if I can help by my full-time abilities, then I would encourage you to put one or two more hours in, and realize that there is homework to be done, but it will only make the experience richer for you. It'll make it richer for the audience. I think an audience always knows when that extra little bit has been put into a show, versus all we had time to do was block the show and get the costumes on. kind of thing.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so I'm very passionate about theater that matters.
Yeah. So I talked to Arcadia a little bit about this as well, but you all have also taken shows on the road internationally.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about that, and what did you bring back to the theater groups that you're working with with that?
Well, certainly in terms of internationally, I mean, I've done some research and stuff in England, and I did a show for 13 weeks in Moscow, Russia. Certainly what I brought back from that is how lucky we are over here to have free speech and to see things through multiple lenses, and to have what's left of a middle class over here. Over there it was, basically you were either uber rich or you were uber poor. And so we got a chance to observe that firsthand and see how it was being portrayed in the theater. I mean, that's the one really wonderful thing about Moscow, is that most of the theaters retained the idea that theater was political. Theater had something to say, and theater had something to move people to action. And I think that there's room even in our musicals, because I know a lot of people like crap all over musicals for being light and being surface kind of thing. There's a lot of great musicals out there, including the one I'm going to be doing next year, that just sort of says, there's much more to this, and there's a reason why this has been so successful. The other things, working in the States, working in across Canada, taking the show that I directed across various provinces and that sort of stuff, has just taught me that, people are people wherever you go. We like to say that about people in the Maritimes, but it certainly is true, everywhere. I loved working down in the Maritimes, and we're taking our show down to PEI in October.
Oh, nice.
But the what I enjoy most and I'm finding most is most helpful is the post-show discussions. People want to talk. They want to share their experiences. And with the one-man show that I directed and that I travel with, they want to say, I know this is your story, but this is my story too. And when I traveled with the Charles Laughton show, people would come up to me afterwards and I said, I know you're talking about Charles Laughton, but I mean, so much of his journey or his voyage was my voyage, and thank you for putting that on stage, because I'm realizing again and again people are not seeing their stories on stage. We assume that everybody is, but the gay community, any part of the spectrum of queer theater thinks that because we've got one or two plays out there, that's what it is. But somebody was talking about play selection the other day, and somebody went, ooh, does that play have to be gay? And I said, well, maybe the response now in these days should be, does that gay have to be heterosexual? Does it have to be white? Does it have to be told through the British lens? Does it have to be told through a male perspective? Or what gender or what sexuality? So sometimes we fall back into the old ruts and the old tropes, but I think that it just takes one person in the cast to look at you and go, walk your talk, walk your talk. And I think then you sort of go, I've got a greater responsibility to everybody, and I've got to leave this profession a better place than certainly when I went into it.
Yeah. How do you go about picking scripts? I guess it's a sort of a sensitive issue, because I guess it depends on what you're choosing, where you're going to be, the people you have access to, et cetera, et cetera. Is there a fine line with what to choose, what not to choose, or what suits best for certain cities or areas? Whatever?
Well, I mean, certainly you're always governed by budget.
Yep.
What budget do we have? Also, if it's a professional theater, how much rehearsal time you've got? Can you actually get it up in that amount of time? Who do you have access to talent pool-wise? Sometimes, you have 3 or 4 shows that require a lot of men, and all of a sudden you need men and you haven't got men. There's a lot of shows we'd love to be doing, but we don't have, we're developing and we're seeing a lot more people coming out, but we don't have the cross-cultural references to do some pieces, but we'd love to, or we'd love them to come forward and say, okay, if you give us the space, we'd like to tell this story, and here's how we would tell it. And we're doing that, I think, with the South Asian community right now. They want to come in and do some Balinese puppetry, but they also want to tell some stories that would be very, very relevant to them, but tell them in a different way. Okay. So in terms of the scripts, it was an excellent question, because South Simcoe Theatre, in all the years that I've been there, we've tried to go for one family-friendly show that would allow some young people to be in it and to cut their teeth, and then one that would be just for entertainment and around Christmas time. We would have one in the winter that would be for people who don't do musical theater, and then one in the spring that would push the boundaries. And our subscribers might sort of go, oh, that's great, or they might go, I think I'm just going to go for a single ticket for that one, and that's fine. It usually opens up to a greater talent pool. It opens up to a greater audience infusion, I guess, in that it calls out to greater communities. And just going back to that idea of I've never seen my story on stage, if you've got, we're doing Pippin next year, and Pippin is traditionally done with very trim dancers who knew the Fosse style. And we're looking at this one and saying, okay, 52 years later, Mr. Fosse is dead, and a lot of people do great Fosse stuff, but what if somebody is 250 pounds and they move really well, but they've got a story to tell? Then this show is really going to be breaking those barriers, and that everybody is welcome to audition for this show, and if they've got the talents that are required by the show, then we'd love to put together as diverse a company as possible. The same thing goes for the scripts. What can we do that will allow for diversity, for inclusion, for representation of people who aren't represented? And then somewhere down the line, we'd love to increase accessibility to the stage, so we could have people with mobility challenges, be both in the audience and part of the productions. Same thing with people who are deaf. Same thing with people who are either poor sight or blind. Those stories, need to be told. They need to be told by a company of those people who have that education and who have lived that life. I can help facilitate it, but I'd love to see other people coming forward and saying, I've got great stories to tell. And I just actually got a hard copy of plays that were written by deaf actors, for deaf actors. And there's also musicals out there. There are two companies out there.
That's awesome.
Deaf West Theater, and I forget what the other one is called, that does musicals predominantly for hard of hearing or deaf casts.
Oh, cool.
So you usually have actors on stage who are signing, as well as people who are not hard of hearing or who are more able in that particular thing. Ableist theater is another thing we talk about. We tend to see things through, I can walk from there to there. What if the person can't walk from there to there? What if the person needs to sit down for the entire show? Can we accommodate that? Yes, of course we can. And so can they.
Yeah.
I hope that we will have directors, we will have playwrights, we will have all things absolutely open and blurred, and every color of the spectrum, every thought of the spectrum, because those are the stories we need to be telling.
Yeah. Do you prefer to be behind the scenes or on the stage?
When I'm a director, I want to be an actor. When I'm an actor, I want to be
Exactly.
a director.
Depending on the stress level, or
Absolutely. Well, and too, there's sometimes where somebody is about to have a breakthrough, and so the actor part of you goes up and says, I might try it like this, but that fits my body and who I am, sort of thing. How can we make that fit for you? But a director might not be able to do that. A director who is also an actor, can usually get that out of them. And the same thing in acting classes. When we're teaching, I'm very much the instructor. I'm very much the director. I'm very much the playwright. I'm very much the actor. But I'm also just a fellow journey person who wants to see people succeed and tell better stories.
Yeah. So if you were doing theater, what do you think you'd be doing? Do you ever think back and go, thank God I'm doing theater, because I don't know what I'd be doing? Or is there something else maybe you put on the back burner that you thought, maybe I should have tried that or done that?
I would probably have, we talked earlier about the idea of, always being a storyteller. I think that I would be a storyteller or a writer. I'm a part-time playwright, but nothing published. A photographer as well, because I think those are storytellers. I would probably would be happy being a gardener for the rest of my life.
There you go.
I love everything that pops up, and I'm really beginning to appreciate everything that happens outdoors.
Tranquil, peaceful.
Yeah. Outside
watching
of the black box
grow.
of theater. Yeah,
watching things grow.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Another question I wanted to ask you was about the theater board.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the theater board? Exactly how you govern, what exactly that you do?
Well, it's once again, that's in flux for all theaters right now, professional and community theater, in that it was traditionally a bunch of people who usually had the ability to be on stage, but they agreed for 2 years to help out, make other things work. Now we're looking for more operational boards where 2 or 3 people on the board are happy just making sure that the money is there and that the money is flowing and that all the people we need are there and all the human resources and all the funding sort of thing. And then there are other people on the board who can guide us towards the future. Younger members or people with a different viewpoint. And then we're looking for the sort of the third part of that triumvirate would be people who want to learn, don't have the answers just yet, but have some really keen observational skills. So you used to try and get one person on the board who was a fundraiser. You used to try and get one person who was a lawyer. And those are all great skills. What you need is people who are okay to say, okay, for the next 2 years, I might not be in as many shows. I want to make the group better. And luckily, the people we have in charge right now, Nancy Smokler and the current board, are very gung-ho about the facility, the venue that we partake in, and also what it means to the community. We're now drawing from much further out and away from Cookstown than we ever were. I did some theater tours on the weekend, and the number of people who went, I walked by this place so often with my dog, I didn't know what went on in here. I said, well, welcome, we're glad to have you here. Come on upstairs, I'll show you the theater. And then they say, well, what kind of opportunities would there be for me to volunteer? And you go, well, there's the board, if you got the time and the expertise. There's backstage, there's onstage, there's front of house, there's any of these things, there's box office, all these things. And so, when you went to see Honeymoon in Vegas, which was a very successful and very popular show.
Wonderful production.
And you saw like 20 or 30 people on stage and backstage, but there was also probably about 100 people other than that who made it work throughout the course of the season, who worked on it from the play selection committee right off the beginning, who made it possible through the board, who found funding to make certain things happen, who went out there and got the talent, and a lot of people who paint and build the sets and make the costumes and that sort of stuff. And we go back, comes full circle to the classes and the workshops, is we are, over the past 2 years, we've had some grants, but most of our classes are self-funded, and we've been doing classes in stage management, classes in set design, costume design, makeup design, lighting and sound design, directing, writing, one-person show writing, workshops, that kind of thing, because that's a very special craft, and acting. Acting in musicals and acting in non-musicals. I don't think there should be a difference, but for some people it is. But yeah, this current board, I think if in September we lose 1 or 2 people after their term is up, and we're looking for people who want to help with a particular vision. They might in 3 or 4 years' time have a different vision and take the theater in yet another healthy way. But right now we've got kind of a 1, 3, 5 year plan that we'd like to see through. And we'd like some younger people. We'd like some people of other communities who have no experience with our theater group. We'd love to break down those barriers between the other theater groups. There used to be a sense of great competition, and now it's like, okay, your director can come over here and do our show, and we can go over and do that.
I've noticed that too, which is wonderful.
It's very healthy.
Yeah.
It's really healthy, and it's really helped us reduce the amount of excess sets and costumes that we build, because you sort of go, well, you've already got something from that time period. Do you have any women's outfits in the with the Empire waist and that sort of stuff? And everybody goes, oh my God, we're overflowing with that. Yeah.
Scott Hurst, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And good to see you as always, and hopefully I'll run into you again soon.
Thank you.